The diplomatic chamber aboard the Celestial Convergence hummed with the low frequency of translated speech as Ambassador Corithval adjusted her crystalline scales. She was magnificent, a dragon from the Draconis Confederacy, her obsidian scales reflecting the starlight that poured through the viewport. Her species had ruled 17 star systems for millennia, and she carried that authority in every deliberate movement. Daniel Chun stood beside his mother, Cassie, trying not to fidget with his school uniform. At 12 years old, he was the youngest human ever permitted aboard a diplomatic vessel. His mother had insisted he come, claiming it was educational. Daniel suspected she just didn't trust the babysitters back on Earth Station Prime.JASSIE. Chun was unremarkable by most standards as an archaeologist. With perpetually messy black hair and an addiction to terrible coffee, she wore her usual outfit, cargo pants with too many pockets and a faded university sweatshirt. But today she'd added one accessory that caught the ambient light, a simple silver ring on her right index finger, adorned with a small blue stone. The terms are non-negotiable, Corithval's voice resonated through the chamber, each word precisely enunciated by the translation matrix. Humanity wishes to expand into the Outer Veil territories. The Confederacy has held these worlds for 3,000 of your years. We do not simply surrender sovereignty because a young species asks politely. The human diplomat, Ambassador Rodriguez, maintained his composure despite the sweat beading on his forehead. Ambassador Corithval, we're not asking you to surrender anything. We're proposing a joint colonization effort. Humans and Draconians working together. Dragons do not work together. Corithval's tail swept across the floor with a sound like grinding stones. We rule or we withdraw. There is no middle ground in our culture. Daniel tuned out the diplomatic back and forth. He'd heard variations of this conversation a dozen times during the 3-day journey. Instead, he studied the dragon ambassador with undisguised fascination. Her scales seemed to shift colors in the light, and her eyes, golden with vertical slits, held an intelligence that was both alien and somehow familiar. Then he noticed it, on one of Corithval's massive claws specifically. The talon equivalent of a ring finger on her left hand was a band of metal. It was intricate, clearly ancient, with a small blue stone set into its surface. The stone pulsed with an internal light that seemed to match her heartbeat. "Mrs. Dragon," Daniel said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. Every head in the chamber turned toward him. Jassie's eyes widened in horror. Ambassador Rodriguez looked like he might have a stroke. "Daniel," Jassie hissed, reaching for her son's arm, but Corithval raised one massive claw, silencing the room. Her golden eyes fixed on the small human child who had dared interrupt. "Yes, young human." "My mom has a ring like that?" Daniel said, pointing at Corithval's talon, then gesturing to Jassie's hand. "See? Same blue stone and everything?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Corithval's massive head swiveled toward Jassie with mechanical precision. For the first time since negotiations began, the dragon's composure cracked. Her scales rippled with an emotion the translation. Matrix struggled to interpret somewhere between shock and something that might have been fear. "Show me," Corithval commanded. Her voice barely above a whisper, Jassie's hand trembled as she raised it. The simple silver ring caught the light, and its blue stone which Daniel had always assumed was just a pretty sapphire suddenly pulsed with the same internal luminescence as Corithval's. The dragon ambassador rose to her full height, nearly scraping the chamber's ceiling. Her wings, which had been carefully folded, extended slightly in what the humans recognized as a defensive posture. "Where did you acquire this?" I found it," Jassie stammered, her archaeologist instincts warring with her survival instincts. 7 years ago on Kepler 442b, it was in a dig site buried under 3 meters of sediment. Carbon dating suggested it was at least 50,000 years old. But that didn't make sense because Kepler 442b wasn't colonized until 50,000 years, Corithval repeated, her voice strange. She looked at her own ring, then back at Jassie's. "That is impossible. Why?" Ambassador Rodriguez found his voice. Sensing that the dynamic in the room had fundamentally shifted, Corithville's scales shimmered through a spectrum of colors, the draconian equivalent of extreme emotional distress. Because these rings are bonding stones. They are created in pairs, grown from the crystallized essence of a dragon's first flame, mixed with neural matter from our bonded companion. They form a psychic link across any distance. She paused, her voice becoming almost vulnerable. My mate gave me this ring 4,000 years ago, before he departed on a colony mission to the far rim. His ship never returned. For 4 millennia, I believed him dead, because these stones die when their bonded partner dies. She extended her talon toward Jassie's hand. But this stone lives. Which means ... which means your mate is alive? Jassie whispered, no. Corithville's eyes narrowed, and suddenly her vast intelligence was fully focused on this unremarkable human woman. It means his bonded companion is alive. But the stone has clearly changed hands. Dragons cannot remove these rings, they're biologically fused to our talons. Which means whoever wears the other ring either killed my mate, or found him dead and took it. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Daniel, blissfully unaware of the implications, piped up again. So if they're bonded rings, can you, talk to my mom through them? Corithville's head tilted, a gesture that was purely draconian but somehow conveyed curiosity. In theory, yes. If both wearers focus their consciousness through the stones, a limited form of communication is possible across vast distances. She looked at Jassie with an expression the translation matrix labeled as desperate hope. Have you ever experienced anything unusual while wearing it? Jassie's face went pale. The dreams, she whispered. For 7 years, I've had dreams of flying through nebulas, of conversations in languages I don't understand, She met Corithville's golden eyes. Of searching. Always searching for something lost. The dragon ambassador's composure finally shattered completely. She sank back onto her haunches, her massive frame trembling. He's alive. After 4,000 years, Varakther is alive. Ambassador Rodriguez cleared his throat. Ambassador Corithville, perhaps we should, the Outer Veil territories. Corithville interrupted, her voice suddenly sharp with renewed purpose. Kepler 442b sits on their border? If Varakther's ring was found there. She looked at the human diplomats with an intensity that made them step back. I am changing my position. The Confederacy will support joint human draconian colonization of the Outer Veil. With one condition, name it, Rodriguez said immediately. Dr. Jassie Chun will lead the xenoarchaeological survey teams. Every site, every artifact, every piece of evidence from that region passes through her first. The dragon's eyes burned with ancient fire. Because somewhere in that darkness, my mate is waiting. And this ring, she gestured to Jassie's hand, is going to help me find him. Daniel tugged on his mother's sleeve. Mom, does this mean we're going on an adventure? Jassie looked at the ring on her finger, this simple piece of jewelry that had just rewritten interstellar politics, and then at the dragon ambassador who now regarded her as the key to a 4,000-year mystery. She thought about the dreams that had haunted her for 7 years, the sense of something vast and ancient calling to her from the dark between stars. Yeah, kiddo, she said softly. I think it does. Ambassador Rodriguez nearly collapsed into his chair, relief and disbelief warring on his face. A crisis had been averted, an alliance forged, all because a 12-year-old boy had pointed out that his mom's ring matched a dragon's. Sometimes, diplomacy happened in the strangest ways.